Have you ever set up a shot and thought to yourself, why does this look so flat? Why doesn't this look like the shot I imagined in my head? Well, it's probably because you're missing one thing. I say depth is the secret behind cinematic images. It's the one thing that separates beginners from experienced filmmakers. Before we break it down, let's define what depth actually is. What is depth? I'd say depth is the illusion of a three-dimensional space in a two-dimensional image. Basically, you're trying to give them that immersive depth feeling. It's not about crazy gear, it's not about crazy sets, it's just about creating layers in your image. So that's foreground, midground, and background. So if you don't separate those layers, your image is going to look a bit flat. And the way we create those layers is through 5 main components. So that's lighting, composition, lens choice, atmosphere, and movement. And once you understand these 5 main key principles, your images will just start to look so much better, so much more immersive, so much more cinematic. So let's start with the biggest one. Lighting is the fastest way to create depth. It doesn't just brighten your scenes, it separates, depending on how you light it, it separates your foreground, midground, and background. So when you think about lighting, you should think about lighting in its separate layers. I think. Too high. Dang, that looks so good. Lighting can be useful for many different things. For depth specifically, you should think about it as a tool to show where one layer starts and one layer ends. I mean, if your scene looks flat out of the gate, it's probably because your lighting isn't creating enough depth in your scene. Depth is literally built through your layers, so composition is going to play a key role in how much depth you're creating. So once again, you can separate these layers, these midground, foreground, background layers, and think about what you can put into each one of those layers to help add more. So for foreground, you could add maybe furniture, plants, lights, anything really. And then midground's usually going to be your subject, so you kind of want to keep the viewer's eyes and visuals on the subject. And then in background, you could put anything, once again, furniture, plants, practical lights in the scene, which really do help. Use traditional techniques like frame within a frame or leading lines like I've used in my previous video. Most beginners only really think about the subject, as experienced cinematographers will think about how the subject sits in the scene. That's pretty good. I'm gonna get another one to be safe. Just to be safe. Just to be safe. But I saw my hand go in this light, so because I thought it was gonna fall. And one common misconception about depth is that without a big space, it's impossible to do. But as long as you focus on creating layers, even in a small space. I mean, take my previous video for example. That aisle is very small, but it's the way I've lit and composed everything so that it's separately layered, which is just creating that depth. Another thing to consider is your lens choice, because your focal length changes how depth is perceived in your image. A longer lens compresses space, so that's why you hear people talking about compression in the background. And then a wide lens will exaggerate the distance and it will just push your background far away from your subject. Neither option is wrong, they just create different kinds of depth. So a wider lens will allow your viewer to feel more part of the environment. However, longer focal lengths will flatten your background to your subject, but they still can be quite a nice look, especially if you get your lighting, composition, everything else correct. This can still look really nice. This brings me to another point about lens choices, to not rely, especially this is a big problem for I think beginners mainly, is to not rely on that low depth feel bokeh in the background. Depth comes from how your lens reveals the space at the same time. So if everything behind me massive blur or mush, it's just going to be a bit disorientating to the viewer. Fog, haze, mist, these things all create atmosphere which helps light to be visible. So let's talk about haze specifically, because haze is the one I used in my previous video. Okay. The reason I used haze here was it's another thing that just helps separate layers once again. So it makes your background lighter and it makes your subject a bit more defined in the image. Probably my favorite part about haze is the way it makes light visible. So like if you had some light rays beaming in, as soon as you add haze, then you can physically see these light rays coming in. It just looks amazing. So just a little bit of haze can help to boost your lighting and just give it that cinematic push. But make sure you don't overdo it. You're trying to shape the light, not hotbox the room out. Movement adds depth because motion naturally reveals space. It's a good way of showing your audience how far things are in a scene. So a slow push in, a gentle slide, or even a handheld sway can help create depth without being too distracting to the viewer. Sound effects are necessary.
Yeah, don't do it in post. That'll warp.
Yeah. Even if your camera's locked off on a tripod, so rather than adding camera movement, you've got to think about the way you can create movement in your scene. So, you know, something brushing past, or like I had the bottle, you know, landing on the barrel to create more depth.
Someone try. I think that might have been good.
Oh, that's good.
No, I won.
I think that was good.
Nice.
Because even yeah, that was the one. Come on. Movement isn't to replace, you know, good lighting, good composition. It's to pair with those things. So now let's combine everything. Lighting separates layers, composition builds layers, your lens choice shapes how these layers interact with each other, and then atmosphere and movement enhances the separation. Once you start seeing your shots in layers, not just a flat image, everything about your filmmaking will improve. So if your scene's looking a bit flat, it's best to check these 5 things.
Don't show that. You don't need to see that. You don't need to see that part. It's so bad.